Welcome to Biden Brief. Russian Foreign Minister lambastes the West but barely mentions Ukraine in UN speech. Associated Press. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov criticized the US and the West for fueling conflicts and trying to maintain a unipolar world order in his speech to the UN General Assembly. Lavrov did not directly address Russia's war in Ukraine but briefly mentioned historical complaints related to the breakup of the Soviet Union. The war in Ukraine has continued for 19 months with no end in sight, as a Ukrainian counteroffensive has made modest advances but no major breakthroughs. Lavrov spoke after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and US President Joe Biden, who both accused Russia of destabilizing Ukraine and violating international rules. For Egypt, Menendez was key to access to billions in US aid. New York Times. Egyptian officials paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to the senior Democratic senator representing New Jersey, Robert Menendez, and his wife, Nadine, according to a recently unsealed federal indictment. In exchange, the senator signed off on arms sales and secretly lobbied the U.S. government to release funding. The significance of the Menendez's support lay in the senator's position on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which has an ability to block Washington's weapons sales. Egypt was particularly vulnerable to the senator's influence, as the country had lost some of its U.S. aid in 2017 due to its poor human rights record. Egypt had reason to fear Menendez's objections to its aid package, as he had used his power to block arms sales to other countries over human rights concerns. The Minister of Foreign Affairs for Egypt, Sami Choukri, lobbied the senator for the release of funds. The senator also met with a senior Egyptian intelligence official the day before the official was scheduled to meet with other senators. Biden faces foreign policy trouble spots as he aims to highlight his experience on the global stage. Associated Press. President Joe Biden is facing a growing list of national security challenges that are testing his administration. These include a diplomatic spat between U.S. allies Canada and India over the killing of a Sikh activist on Canadian soil, growing concern about the future of U.S. funding for Ukraine, and the indictment of Senator Bob Menendez, chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Each of these issues will test Biden's ability to navigate foreign policy challenges. The indictment of Menendez is a particularly significant distraction, as it comes at a time when the administration is trying to push Congress to pass additional assistance for Ukraine. Meanwhile, there is growing concern that future U.S. aid for Ukraine could become captive to a looming government shutdown. Biden has also faced skepticism about his age from voters, and he has sought to highlight his decades of foreign policy experience to demonstrate his ability to handle delicate international issues. However, these challenges are coming at a time when Biden is trying to position himself as a strong leader on the global stage. Was McCarthy distracted from governing by impeachment inquiry? Washington Post. House Republicans have vowed to take a long, methodical approach to investigating President Biden over potential wrongdoing. I want this to take a long time. I really do, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, Republican Georgia, a member of the House Oversight and Accountability Committee, said in a recent interview. We're just going to keep plowing ahead, doing our work, Representative Jim Jordan, Republican Ohio, chairman of the Judiciary Committee, told reporters Thursday. But there are whispers from some rank-and-file Republicans that their leadership got too fixated on these investigations, losing focus on processing the government funding bills from the House Appropriations Committee. That's now left the House GOP certain to face the blame if there's a shutdown of the federal government starting next Sunday unless they can pull off a fast legislative trick. Moreover, when the House Oversight Committee gathers Thursday for its first formal hearing on the impeachment inquiry, the shadow of the looming shutdown will blot out any spotlight the GOP hopes to shine on Biden, leaving the hearing to play at least second fiddle to the ongoing machinations to fund the government. We allowed ourselves to basically get so distracted with all the other shiny objects that we didn't actually get ahead of our real job, which is to be appropriators, Representative Corey Mills, Republican Florida, told reporters after leaving an emergency GOP meeting late Thursday. There's a certain irony for House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, Republican California, to have his own members blaming the impeachment focus for the looming shutdown. After taking a longer than usual 46-day legislative break in the late summer, McCarthy's first day back in the Capitol, September 12, turned into a frenzy as he unilaterally announced that the Oversight, Judiciary and Ways and Means Committees were entering an official impeachment inquiry. His rank-and-file Republicans saw the move mostly as a ploy to try to quell angst among far-right lawmakers ahead of the September 30 deadline to keep federal agencies funded. Those ideological warriors dismissed the impeachment move as something otherwise overdue and then ratcheted up their demands on cutting government spending. McCarthy, struggling to govern, throws impeachment chum into the waters. Rather than focusing on impeachment, the far-right faction of 10 to 15 Republicans has instead paralyzed the House and set in motion a convoluted strategy with little hope for success. Mills, a freshman who has not previously been part of the far-right troublemaking crowd, declared, "I blame leadership because the entire summer drifted away without resolving this mess. We had the time to do this. We had the entire month of August, we had all of September," he said. The speaker is fond of defending his leadership style by saying that he allows for a wide-open process that would allow for plenty of oversight, investigations and legislation. People can actually have a say. It's not one way or the highway, McCarthy told reporters Tuesday morning. McCarthy's allies, in a briefing with reporters on Friday, suggested the negotiating process with fellow Republicans took so many months because so many newcomers had never been in the majority and didn't understand how government funding works. This was a new concept to some members, said Representative Patrick T. McHenry, Republican North Carolina, who was McCarthy's lead negotiator on the debt and budget deal with Biden administration officials earlier this year. The new face of nuclear energy is Miss America. Wall Street Journal. Miss America, Oliver Stone, Elon Musk and Sam Altman are among the growing number of supporters of nuclear power as a solution to climate change. The push for atomic energy has been reinforced by a documentary by Stone and a pageant tour by reigning Miss America Grace Stank, who is an engineering student and whose father was saved from cancer by radiation treatments. Although the U.S. has a history of opposition to nuclear power, opinions are changing, with 57% of Americans now supporting its use as a source of electricity, according to a Pew survey. Turkey's Erdogan steps up efforts to save Black Sea grain deal. RFI. Turkey is attempting to revive a grain deal with Russia in order to avert a potential famine and soaring food prices. The deal, brokered last year by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, has been stalled due to Russian demands for the easing of sanctions. Analysts believe Erdogan's close ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin make him the best hope for persuading Russia to return to the deal. However, granting Russia's demands could create tensions with the US and Europe, who will weigh the benefits of the deal against the costs of accommodating Russia's demands on Ukraine and its war efforts. Erdogan may seek the support of the United Nations to convince US President Joe Biden to make concessions. However, any NATO naval deployment to protect grain shipments in the Black Sea would require Turkey's permission, forcing the country to take sides in the Ukrainian conflict. U.S. government heads for shutdown as Republicans squabble over spending. Financial Times. The U.S. government is facing a potential shutdown from next weekend as lawmakers struggle to reach a budget deal. If an agreement is not reached by midnight next Saturday, millions of federal workers will be furloughed and non-essential government operations will grind to a halt. The budget standoff is the result of divisions within the Republican Party over taxing and spending, including whether to approve additional aid for Ukraine. The right wing of the House Republican Conference, emboldened by former President Donald Trump, is threatening to oppose any bipartisan compromise and even remove the Speaker of the House from his post. Latest wave of migrants at U.S.-Mexico border puts Biden under renewed pressure. CNN. A fresh surge of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border has put President Joe Biden's immigration policies to the test and drawn criticism from Republicans. The surge comes as the administration is dealing with images of migrants crossing into the U.S. in large groups and rolling out a major move that will make hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans eligible to work in the U.S. The situation is likely to have political implications for Biden as he ramps up his re-election campaign and faces ongoing criticism from Republicans over his handling of the border. Biden campaign is off and running against Trump out of public view. Washington Post. U.S. President Joe Biden's 2024 re-election campaign is being organized behind the scenes, with plans for campaign offices in swing states yet to be opened and no solo campaign rallies. However, Biden and his team have recently begun laying out his argument for re-election and addressing concerns about his age. Biden's campaign staff have moved into a Delaware office tower and briefed private donors on their strategies for polling, digital outreach, and the Electoral College map. At a recent donor event in Chicago, campaign manager Julie Chavez Rodriguez and Deputy Quinton Fulks detailed the Electoral College map they believe will be favorable for Biden, with a focus on 7 states including Nevada, Arizona, North Carolina, and Georgia. However, when they mentioned Florida, one attendee said there were deep eye rolls from the crowd. Biden's team also briefed donors on their plans to adapt to the new media environment, including increased use of organic social media sharing and the role of influencers to reach voters. The campaign has not officially settled on a Republican opponent, but it is widely assumed that it is being built to take on Donald Trump. Fox News viewers love Trump. Newsmax viewers idolize him. Washington Post. A new poll by CNN and the University of New Hampshire has found that Newsmax viewers and Joe Rogan listeners are more devoted to Donald Trump than Fox News viewers. While 76% of Newsmax viewers and 65% of Rogan listeners said they would vote for Trump in the GOP primary, only 43% of Fox News viewers and 45% of conservative radio listeners said the same. This finding is important as Trump has the power to turn his supporters against Fox News and encourage them to switch to other outlets, such as Newsmax. Misinformation research is buckling under GOP legal attacks. Washington Post. Academics, universities, and government agencies are overhauling or ending research programs designed to counter the spread of online misinformation amid a legal campaign from conservative politicians and activists who accuse them of colluding with tech companies to censor right-wing views. The escalating campaign, led by Representative Jim Jordan, Republican Ohio, and other Republicans in Congress and state government, has cast a pall over programs that study not just political falsehoods but also the quality of medical information online. Facing litigation, Stanford University officials are discussing how they can continue tracking election-related misinformation through the Election Integrity Partnership, EIP, a prominent consortium that flagged social media conspiracies about voting in 2020 and 2022, several participants told the Washington Post. The coalition of disinformation researchers may shrink and also may stop communicating with X and Facebook about their findings. The National Institutes of Health froze a $150 million program intended to advance the communication of medical information, citing regulatory and legal threats. Physicians told the Post that they had planned to use the grants to fund projects on non-controversial topics such as nutritional guidelines and not just politically charged issues such as vaccinations that have been the focus of the conservative allegations. NIH officials sent a memo in July to some employees, warning them not to flag misleading social media posts to tech companies and to limit their communication with the public to answering medical questions. Social media platforms have pulled back on moderating content even as evidence mounts that Russia and China have intensified covert influence campaigns. Next week, the disinformation watchdog NewsGuard will release a study that found 12 major media accounts from Russia, China, and Iran saw the number of likes and reposts on X nearly double after Musk removed labels calling them government-affiliated. Exclusive: Biden aides in talks with Vietnam for arms deal that could irk China. Reuters. The U.S. is reportedly in talks with Vietnam over a potential arms deal that could be the largest in history between the two nations. The agreement would involve the sale of a fleet of American F-16 fighter jets to Vietnam, which is seeking to build up its maritime defenses amid tensions with China in the South China Sea. The deal could irk China and sideline Russia, which has supplied the majority of Vietnam's arsenal. The exact terms of the deal are yet to be worked out, and it may not come to fruition. Fears grow that overseas targeted killing by states is on the rise. Washington Post. India has been placed on a list of countries suspected of carrying out targeted killings beyond their borders. This follows allegations that India was involved in the assassination of Canadian citizen and Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar on Canadian soil. If proved, India would join a group of countries including Russia, Saudi Arabia, and Iran that have been accused of plotting lethal attacks overseas. China and other countries are also suspected of engaging in surveillance, intimidation, and abduction campaigns on foreign soil. The U.S. has not publicly endorsed the allegations against India, but current and former U.S. officials consider the case credible. However, India is not expected to face meaningful sanctions from the international community. The U.S. will have to balance siding with Canada against its desire to cultivate closer ties with India as an ally against Chinese influence. Biden to supply Kyiv with long-range ATACMS missiles after months of lobbying. Financial Times. The U.S. has decided to send long-range missiles to Ukraine, according to people familiar with the matter. The missiles, known as ATACMS, will be equipped with cluster munitions and have a range of up to 300 kilometers, 190 miles. The decision was made prior to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit to the U.S., but it was not publicly announced to avoid alerting Russia. The U.S. will send the missiles in small quantities at first. The move comes after the U.S. announced a $325 million aid package for Ukraine, which includes air defense and additional cluster munitions. New India-EU trade route, bringing the Gulf states closer? Deutsche Welle. The U.S., European Union, India, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other member states of the G20 have declared their intention to create an India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC, according to a document prepared by the European Commission. The corridor would include a rail link, an electricity cable, a hydrogen pipeline, and a high-speed data cable. The planned corridor will be around 4,800 kilometers and will have two separate sections. The eastern wing will connect India with the Gulf states, and the northern wing will go from the Gulf states to Europe. The trade corridor is similar to China's Belt and Road Initiative. The US is trying to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative and bring its partners in the Gulf closer. The countries involved in the IMEC are not working according to the old geopolitical order that lined the US allies up against other groups, such as China and Russia. Labour, you can trust us on defence. We are committed to NATO and US leadership. Telegraph. Members of the UK's Labour Party are seeking to strengthen connections with the US Democratic Party and the Biden administration ahead of the next general election. Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy and Shadow Defense Secretary John Healey recently visited Washington, D.C., to promote a new Labour foreign and defense policy. The trip aimed to demonstrate the parties' commitment to the transatlantic relationship and its support for the US and UK's supply of arms and aid to Ukraine. The visit followed a series of announcements aligning Labour policies with those of the Biden administration, including a pledge to launch a major funding program for decarbonization technology. Democrats are cruel to pretend that Joe Biden is fine. Telegraph. US President Joe Biden has once again made an embarrassing gaffe, repeating the same story almost word for word just minutes apart during a speech at a campaign reception in Manhattan. The incident has raised concerns about the 80-year-old president's age and ability to serve. This comes after a similar slip-up during his United Nations General Assembly address, where he stumbled while talking about the US and China working together on accelerating the climate crisis. Some are questioning the wisdom of allowing this to continue and are calling for Biden to retire. Democrats are building an Orwellian Ministry of Truth. Telegraph. President Joe Biden's re-election campaign has announced that Rob Flaherty, a former White House aide, will lead efforts to combat online misinformation. Flaherty has a history of working for the Democratic Party and has been involved in efforts to censor the internet. His hiring reflects the growing trend of powerful figures seeking to control the flow of information and suppress inconvenient truths. This poses a threat to freedom of expression and the First Amendment in the United States. The partnership between the Biden campaign and technology companies raises concerns about the control of information and the potential erosion of democracy. Tired of seeing our tech ripped off, U.S. Congressman wants tighter China curbs. South China Morning Post. House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul is calling for tighter restrictions on U.S. firms' investment in China. He believes that Congress should go beyond the restrictions proposed by President Joe Biden and impose sanctions on individual Chinese firms involved in defense or surveillance efforts. McCaul also wants to strengthen a Senate-passed measure that currently only requires firms to notify the government about investments in China's high-tech sectors. He believes that sales should be prohibited rather than just notifying the government. McCaul's comments come after Huawei showed it has been able to partially overcome U.S. sanctions and make tech breakthroughs. I spent months following the same people as him to find out who fuels his curious worldview. The Guardian. A writer for The Guardian has spent the summer following the Twitter accounts Elon Musk follows to get a glimpse into the mind of the Tesla CEO. David Runciman found Musk's timeline was influenced by accounts with a contrarian, anti-liberal, pro-Russia and COVID skeptic worldview. However, the billionaire did not appear to share these views himself, apart from his skepticism about the risk of inflation and his support for AI. Runciman also noted that Musk's Twitter timeline became heavily cluttered with promoted tweets as the Tesla CEO moved to monetize Twitter, leading him to conclude that Musk's outlook is upbeat apocalypticism. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.